I sawed at the wood as my fingertips bled. I couldn't feel the pain. A sort of primal adrenaline kicked in, like those mothers who lift cars off their children. Only in this case, I was pushing off the car Mom had dropped on me. I cut until an opening appeared. Beautiful, fresh sunlight filled the closet. All my aches and nausea scattered like birds. I was one step away from freedom. As I reached through and twisted the lock, I heard my mom from the kitchen. It was a single scream and then footsteps. By the time she grabbed my hand, the door was already unlocked. With my remaining strength, I twisted the doorknob and pushed. She fell onto the door. I heard her feet slide against the floorboards, desperate to keep me inside. I pushed one final time. She slammed back into the wall. No, 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 she cried. Please! I collapsed into the hallway and fell onto my back. It was incredible to lie down. Exhaustion filled my aches. All I wanted was for all of this to stop, for Mom to love me again. I looked up at her, desperate to show her that it was me, her son, but she wouldn't look at me. Instead, she sprinted toward the kitchen. I somehow made it back on my feet. I caught myself in the bathroom mirror. My cheeks were sunken and my eyes seemed to pop out of my head. I looked like a front yard Halloween skeleton, every joint pronounced and bent, ready to be formed into something human. I tried to speak, but my saliva was thick as glue. Ma, I managed. I hobbled into the kitchen. When Mom saw me, she looked like she was going to vomit. She cornered herself by the stove and grabbed a knife. She pointed it at me. Get back in there, she said. I stepped closer to her. It was getting hard to see, like driving through the fog. Every few seconds, everything cut out. My chest filled with the irresistible urge to sleep. Ma, I said again. I looked around the kitchen, but I barely recognized it. All the knives and utensils were wrapped in duct tape. The cleaning containers were piled in the corner, empty. On the kitchen table, there were hundreds of sticky notes, each one with a different name and number. They all had check marks next to them. There was writing on the walls, the same phrase over and over again. I tried to read it, but my eyes wouldn't focus. I just needed to get close to her. Maybe if she felt my touch, she would remember. Please, I said. Is me. Stay back, she screamed. I was a few steps away from her now. She crossed her arms over her face. I reached out. She screamed louder. The sound hurt my brain. She crawled onto the countertop and kicked at me. With each movement, she moved closer and closer to the stovetop. Don't be true. Please, God, she cried. Don't be true. I reached out and touched her shoulder. Her skin was soft as rain. I swear I didn't push her or grab her or, God forbid, strike her. I just needed her to feel me. When I felt warmth, I started to cry. For all the nights of cold and filth and trembling legs, the feeling of skin on skin was immaculate. But the good feeling didn't last long. Her legs kept kicking, swinging along the dials of the stove. Her waist was completely on top of the burners now. When I heard the sound, I knew exactly what it was. She didn't hear it. She was lost in her crying. Move, I tried. I grabbed her arm, but she kicked me. I fell back, my shoulders slamming the kitchen island. I got back to my feet and went for the dial. I couldn't reach it though. I grabbed at her legs one last time, but it was too late. When she felt the fire, it had already climbed up her back. She pushed me aside and ran. Before I could speak, the sleepy, blackout feeling hit my brain like a stampede. I tripped backwards, then was gone. Next thing I remember, I was looking up. The room was filled with bright light. The edges of my vision were blurred, like a dream trying to come to life. The sound my mom made was beyond human. They were screams from another dimension. Her pain was deep as the ocean, and I could feel it in my own body. She flailed and fought for the surface, but she sank deeper into that unimaginable dark, where skin curled from heat and eyeballs exploded in their sockets. I turned to watch her frantic waltz. The flames had eaten her skin. Her mouth was merely teeth and muscle, biting for words as if they could save her. But they couldn't. Nothing could. She did a few laps of the kitchen and then collapsed in the hallway. The fire climbed the walls. I watched the flames without emotion. It was like walking into a theater halfway through the movie. I could see, but I didn't understand. The dark feeling came back. In a moment, I was asleep again. The next time I woke up, I managed to get on my feet. Instinctively, I went to the sink and turned on the faucet. I drank like an animal. The water filled me with the purest joy. My thoughts were reforming, my muscles singing, my glue mouth turning back into spit. But that happiness was short-lived. As my senses came back, I could smell again. It reminded me of the first days of autumn, when your windows are open and the neighborhood is alive with fire pits. Mom and I used to love that part of the year. The air was crisp, and the fires filled every room with a bittersweet, charred flavor. I turned to the source of the smell. The object was half hidden by the hallway. All I saw were what looked to be 2 burnt logs. Slowly, I remembered Mom and the kicking in the stovetop, but just as I easily could, I could forget those details. My brain was too tired. The dead body was just another thing. When you spend so long in darkness, your brain can lose the ability to feel. Feeling comes from light, from rest, from the taste of fresh air. Those luxuries were dead to me. I smelled a campfire. I tasted charred wallpaper. All I saw in my mom's burnt corpse was a series of atoms, crudely arranged in an improper shape. I wasn't interested in any more pain. I was only interested in answers. I walked to the kitchen table and looked at the post-it note she'd left. There were names and numbers for every kind of business under the sun. Next to each number, she wrote the name of a crime: starvation, poisoning, stabbing, shooting, hanging, blunt force trauma, drowning, etc., etc., etc. She had checked off nearly 100 crimes and the businesses who, she assumed, would know something about them. But more than any other business, there was one: psychics. Mom had called nearly 24 psychics. I looked up at the walls. Now I could see the message she had written. She repeated it over and over, covering every inch of the space with her penciled markings. The person you love most will hurt you in unforgivable ways. The person you love most will hurt you in unforgivable ways. The person you love most will hurt you in unforgivable ways. The person you love most will hurt you in unforgivable ways. Over and over and over again. I thought back to the last conversation we had. I heard the drunk voices in the background, begging for shots. I listened to the distant sounds of marching bands trailing up Bourbon Street. Mom yelled through the noise, "We're going to a psychic for some last-minute New Orleans fun." I lowered my head. I couldn't look at her frantic handwriting any longer. I heaved for air. Outside, the spring wind pressed against the window. It sounded like a storm was coming. Mom never liked to open the windows. She always said she paid for air conditioning and heat. Why settle for a temperature you can't control? For my whole life, I've understood her logic. But now, the smell of her burnt body was making me sick. I stood up and opened the window. The cold breeze came inside as if it had been waiting. I sat down at the kitchen table and closed my eyes. The familiar darkness was comforting. I tried not to think. Instead, I listened to the hiss of the wind. I felt its ice-cold hands wrap around me. I wanted to bathe in that feeling. Wind meant the earth was still turning, that time was still moving. I didn't want to close the windows and pretend I was stronger than the wind. If I didn't know it then, I knew it now. There were certain forces too powerful to control. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's story. If you did, be sure to hit a like. Or, if you want to support the channel, be sure to subscribe. Also, if you're looking to suggest any stories, you can find me over on my Discord in the link below. Anyways, guys, be careful out there, because you never know what's hiding in the dark.